everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. The ARC of California is thrilled to offer Caring Futures, a proven resource program dedicated to supporting caregivers and family members of adults with disabilities. Understanding the unique challenges faced by family caregivers as they age, Caring Futures offers critical planning assistance, resources, and a supportive community. Caring Conversations is just one part of Caring Futures program here at the ARC of California. We will share more about our other offerings by Caring Futures at the end of today's conversation, so please stay tuned. As you see, we have ASL interpretation for our discussion today. You can turn on closed captioning by clicking the button in the bar below. At the end of today's conversation, there will be a question and answer session. At that time, we'll invite you to raise your hand or type in your question in the Q&A to ask our guests directly. For those of you that don't know me, hello everyone. My name is Felisa Strickland. I am a proud sole parent caregiver for my daughter Lily. Lily is 23 years old. She has a diagnosis of cerebral palsy, autism, epilepsy, and IDD, and she requires full-time care. We enjoy our life and live in Santa Barbara, California. Alongside full-time caregiver, I am a strong advocate for individuals with disabilities. I serve as a board member for the ARC of California, as well as Alpha Resource Center of Santa Barbara. I also participate on many committees and enjoy getting involved in fundraisers and advocacy projects in our community. As a Caring Futures instructor and parent educator, I am thrilled to be here for this important conversation with our guest. Today's topic is Understanding Self-Determination, Your Role as a Family Caregiver. Today we have Kristianna Moralls here. Her pronoun is she, her, and she is the Director of Self-Determination Program Projects at Disability Voices United. As the director, Kristianna leads the self-determination training and conferences. She supports the Regional Center's local advisory committee, contracts for training and resource fairs. Kristianna implements the Competitive Integrated Employment Project research and training. Sharing a deep commitment to advocating for the civil rights of people with disabilities and a passion for person-centered planning, Kristianna brings dedication and thoughtfulness to her role. She has firsthand knowledge of these challenges of the community and has many years of experience navigating these systems, with life experience both advocating for her autistic son as well as supporting foster youth with disabilities. Kristianna has over 2 decades of professional experience with special education advocacy and regional center advocacy through private and nonprofit organizations. She supported disabled foster youth as a court-appointed special advocate and as an educational rights holder through Children's Law Center of Los Angeles. Kristianna completed training for independent facilitation with State Council on Developmental Disabilities, Autism Society of Los Angeles, Claudia Cares, and the Guidelight Group. She has a certificate from Helen Sanderson and associates in person-centered thinking. She earned a certificate and continues to work with Disability Voices United, Emerging Leaders Program. Kristianna completed her COPAA, USC, UCEDD, Special Education Advocacy Training Seat, and is a member of the Council of Parents, Attorneys, and Advocates. Kristianna has Dispute Resolution Program Act certification from Loyola, I can't say the word, Loyola Law School. She is a certified OLIUS bully prevention trainer and QPR gatekeeper instructor. Born and raised in Los Angeles and Orange County, Kristianna obtained a Bachelor of Science in Applied Social Science, a Master of Science in Organizational Leadership, and is a doctoral student in public administration. Without further ado, please welcome Kristianna. Hi, Kristianna. Hi, good to see you. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so impressed and so excited to be here. I think that you guys are doing amazing work with Caring Futures. It's just so my pleasure to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you too. You have got all the experience that we need to talk about this important conversation today because, and believe me, I know we have a big audience out there that's excited to dive in. So before we get started, if you wouldn't mind, could you give us a little bit of background on how your role as a parent to a son with autism influences your work and the advocacy efforts on behalf of the disability community?
Absolutely. So, while I wear many hats, which you kind of heard about, my most important one is that I have a 22-year-old son who is has been a regional center client since he was 3.5 years old, and he has been. We're actually going into his fourth year of self-determination. We just
Oh,
started
wow.
his rollover, and it went pretty quickly. And for us, it was really what I think so many people know of as the drop off, right? As he was finishing school, he had that kind of regular schedule where he was seeing people, and then there was kind of nothing. And we really realized at that point something had to change. He was really unhappy. The programs that were being offered to him in the traditional system um, were not what he wanted to do. And so that was really what led us to self-determination and kind of became my first love and talking points now.
Well, good. Yeah, that's I think as parents, we just sort of become these automatic advocates, right? Because we have so many systems and services to navigate, and there's so much to learn. And then, of course, like you mentioned in the beginning of that introduction, we want their day, our kids' days, to be what they want them to be, right? And sometimes that takes a little bit of creativity, and I think self-determination is one way to get us there, right? So many of our viewers are familiar with self-determination, but would you give us just a brief overview of what it is and how it can benefit individuals with disabilities and how to determine if it might be the right fit for you or your family?
That's such a great question, and I laugh because it's difficult to explain, and so I have come up with kind of an analogy that works for me. Hopefully, it works for everybody else. Um, Self-determination program is an alternative way to receive services if you are a regional center client. And so I think of the traditional system as an HMO. You use whatever vendors they have, you have to work within their system, and that's the way the traditional system works. And the self-determination program is more similar to a PPO, where you get to pick your provider. You're no longer required to use those vendored services. Now, it's all Medicaid money, so we have limits on what we can spend the money on. So that it's not like you get this money and you can just go crazy and do whatever you want. There's always, I call it freedom within boundaries. But the difference is when you're in the traditional system, you're always talking hours and who they're going to pick the provider. You're going to say you get X amount of hours for this. When you go into self determination, you're going to be provided a budget, a dollar amount of how much you can spend and how you can meet your goals of what you want your life to look at like within those boundaries. Pretty freely, as long as you're staying within those. The opportunities are kind of as endless as your creativity. And what I can do, I think it's so difficult for people to understand unless you get an example. I like the idea of like you go to a restaurant and they don't give you a menu and they just say, "What do you want to eat?" so so to me, the easiest way to explain self determination is an example from my son. And so when we started the transition process, we didn't have a large budget because the services he kind of gone through all the social skills, didn't like any of the vendored service. He didn't, and he would say to me, "Mom, the only thing I have in common with these people is that I have autism. Like, how do I learn to socialize with people? I don't have anything in." And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of smart. Like, why are you not in charge?" So we put him in charge. And so we took a combination of the money for our respite care, personal assistant. We had a little bit of transportation money that would help pay for his access fees, and his social skills. And we took all of that dollar amount together and we created a system for him where he likes to go and play. He goes to his local a comic book store and he plays a game called Magic the Gathering. I don't know if you know what it is, but it's like a card game people like to play. And these are his people. These are the people he wants to hang out with. And so we were able to hire somebody to who played Magic the Gathering. He was one of the people who loved to play. And so he would come and pick up my son and they would go and he would help him with his social pieces and like, hey, get so and so's phone number or let's text them and help with that social piece in a natural environment. And then they would come home. And so if you think about what was covered there, well, respite. I got a break, right? I was able to have a break from it. He got transportation. He got to be in the community doing what he wanted. And all of that ended up costing a heck of a lot less than all of those traditional services. So then we had money for him to do some other things. And so that's kind of how I like to think about what self-determination can look like.
Yeah, it sounds amazing, right? Like, why wouldn't everybody want to do it that way? Yeah, like that's what you, yeah. So as a parent, caregiver in this process, um, what are the specific things that you need to know, if you're considering self-determination for your um loved one or your family member, your child? What are the things that you sort of need to start gathering in your mind to venture down this road, to take this journey?
I laughed when you said, why did it, it sounds great. Why doesn't everybody do it? Well,
Yeah,
I'm going to tell you why everybody doesn't do it right now,
thank you. Yeah,
which is because we're going to talk, we're going to be real about this, right?
yeah,
Which is like anything, any other service you've got along the way, school district, in-home support services, social security, any of those, there is a process to it. Anything is you have to learn how the system works and how to manage it. And self-determination program is just like this. There is a process to transition into it, and then there's a process to manage it once you're in. And with the that freedom that we talked about of we can hire who we want and we can pick these things. Well, I had to hire that person. And
right.
so along with that freedom comes the responsibility. So it is an increased responsibility on either the participant if they are running their own program or their parent if they are running the program. Um, so there what I'll say is kind of what I see this similar to any other program, which is there's that learning curve in the beginning. You have to figure out how the system works. And once you've figured it out, for me, his program by year, I'd say by year two, it it's no more work for me than it was trying to get services out of the traditional regional center system. We've kind of got it into a groove. I was very nervous personally about hiring people. I'd never done it before. I was like, oh, like, and so we eased into it. We started with hiring cousins and family members, and then, oh, that didn't work. They don't have enough hours, so now we're going to add somebody else. And so now I'm like, that's old hat. I can do this now, right? So there is that learning curve. So I would say for caregivers to understand in the beginning, it's going to take more time than you're probably experiencing. But for my son, the results are worth the time and effort because every amount of time I've put into it has been so productive and the flexibility with traditional system, you get what you get. And if you want to change, it's a big ordeal, right? Like this vendor's not
Right.
working, change, it takes a long time. In self-determination, he can say, well, for this month, I want to do, bowling, and next month I'm going to go take an art class. As long as it's in his spending plan, he can switch back and forth and do the things that he wants to do, kind of like we do in life. We're our
Yeah.
lives are much more fluid, and so that to me that's the really important piece is my son having kind of the same civil rights as anybody else to make choices about how he spends his time and what he wants to study in school or what he wants to, how he's going to spend his day as an adult.
Yeah, that is so important. I love that you put a timeline on it, right? Like, because we do have to realize that, like, with all the processes of the systems and services that we navigate, there's, they don't just happen like that. It's not a snap of a finger, right? There's usually going to be some sort of delay or some sort of approval that needs to take place. Or so that's one thing, to expect that, right? To expect, and then also as you're learning and navigating it, you're gonna need to be patient with that process as well, because you're learning how to manage a whole new a whole new way. But the part that I really love about what you just said is the ability and the freedom to actually create the life that your child wants instead of just what's always been available, right? Like this is the way we've always done things. Well, now we can get a little bit creative about that. Um, so learning the process is probably going to be the hardest part, right? And then having the patience, but then getting everything set up and in place, and now you start to reap the benefits, right, of a happy person living the life that they want to live. That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, that's again, why wouldn't everybody want to do that? Um, so I know of many families that have been discouraged about getting started either by regional center snags or not being able to find the vendors or just becoming overwhelmed with understanding the process and its management. What would you suggest for these families above and beyond the typical orientation? Now, you just, of course, gave us some of that, but I mean, are there any other things that you would suggest that families could do if they're discouraged, that maybe they're already in the process and it's not going as planned? Now they're considering, is this really for us? What would you say to those families?
Um, so right now, what I typically tell people, if you're going to transition into self-determination, to plan about 9 months. And I think everybody's like, oh my gosh. But then I look back, it's been a long time since my son got into the regional center, but I want to say it took 6, 7 months for him to do the assessments and get in. Part of what takes longer to transition into the program is, remember, we're going to have that budget, and they give you a budget based on what would have been spent on you in the traditional system. And a lot of us have gotten to the point where we weren't using any services. So at the point that we started talking about my son's budget, we didn't have that because the service, it's not that he didn't need services. The vendors they had didn't work. So they'd kind of just dropped off over time. Or we would have it, for us, and they like respite, we could never find respite providers. So while we had it, we weren't using it. And so that budget took some time to renegotiate and say, okay, had we stayed in the traditional system, and you actually could have provided a service that was meaningful to us, this is what you would have spent. So that can take time. It also might mean something like uh, you need an assessment, because maybe it's something that in order for them to know how many hours, like if it was behavioral support or speech or something that would need an assessment, you got to get the assessment to get those hours added to your budget. So that's why it can take some time to get in. Um, and so, and then as far as being discouraged, um, I laugh because my master's degree was in organizational leadership through change, and I'm going to give you my entire degree. What I learned was everybody believes we need change, but nobody wants to change themselves. And that's really what I hear with the service coordinators. This is something new, it's different. And so there is a resistance to change in that. And so, but what I have found over time as an independent facilitator, once service coordinators, I honestly believe nobody goes into service coordination who doesn't want to help people. And so when they start seeing the results of when they get into second year and third year, and they're seeing how people are doing so well in self-determination, we turn around service coordinators. They'll say, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is working. But I'll say, self-determination, I don't believe there's one right way. It should be individualized. And it really is for the family members and the participant to say, well, what's the right, if you're in the traditional system and it's working for you, you should stay with it, right?
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and so it's really individualized of, if it's not working for you and there's things that you wish that you could get, services you wished you could get, then I think you would dive into the deep end and do
Yeah.
this.
And
And then the last part would be finding other families doing it. That support is so helpful.
yeah, I think so too. That's with everything that we do, right? Our family support, parent to parent support has always been a lifeline for me. Like it's always helpful to see how other people are handling things. What are you get ideas that you didn't think of. And you also get the opportunity to offer support to them too, like it's just, it's a win-win. So you mentioned independent facilitator. Can you explain the roles of the independent facilitator and the financial management service, and what do caregivers need to know about those functions?
So, don't I love how everything has an acronym and this whole other language, right? So self-determination program has its own language, and independent facilitators is one of those the pieces. This is the person who's going to help you navigate this system, but not only um, just transitioning in, they're going to help you find services. So you want to find somebody who is able, who knows your community, knows your neighborhood. Um, and so they can offer kind of three different roles. An independent facilitator can help you with your initial person-centered plan. We hadn't really talked about the person-centered plan, but that is kind of the foundation of where all of your self-determination programs starts. And person-centered plans are so different from assessments because for the first time, we're not talking about what they can't do. We're talking about what they want to do. And how
Right,
do we help them accomplish those things? And based on that, is where we're going to draw the services and supports that we need. And so independent facilitators can help with the person-centered planning. They can help with that budget negotiation we were talking about. And then they can help you create your spending plan, how you're going to spend that money. Like we said, in the community, knowing the services, they can help you find employees. They can help you pick your financial management service, which kind of leads to the second part of that question. So the regional center doesn't take that budget dollar amount and say, here's some cash, go run off, be good.
yeah.
For a couple reasons, that's not a good plan. The obvious one, we'd all end up in Hawaii, but the other one is that most of our loved ones have social security and they can't have money come in, right? So we want to make sure it's not going to impact their benefits. So what happens is the regional center basically gives purchase a service. I like to think of it like a line of credit to this financial management service, and then you spend the money from there and they pay everything for you. So kind of think of it like your personal bank, and they'll make all the payments. Um, just like we have 21 regional centers that like to do it things 21 different ways, we
Hmm.
now have 20 financial management services who are slightly different. And so that's really your independent facilitator can help you pick the right financial management service for you. Kind of based on your needs. So some are, if you have a lot of employees and don't do a lot of things in the community, then there might be ones that work better for you, and there are ones who are better at paying for things out in the community. So my personal recommendation is finding the right independent facilitator for you for that transition process is going to make your life so much easier in that
Right,
transition process. Finding the right financial management service for you once you're in is going to make your life so much easier. So if they have a waiting list and you go, oh, this is the right one, I would wait for them rather than just take whoever is available. So we kind of were joking earlier about it's an exercise in patience.
yeah.
But doing your transition right is going to make your life easier in the long run. So be patient and do it the way that's going to work the best for your family, rather than trying to get in here quick. I'm a really impatient person, so it's really hard for me to like just give me anything. And it doesn't mean you can change financial management services if you find the one's not working. You can change independent facilitators if you're like, oh, this person's not working for me. Or some of them don't offer all the services. Like maybe you have one who helps transitions, but they don't help ongoing, helping you hire people. So you can
Right.
have multiple independent facilitators. Um, but I want to make sure everybody knows both of those services are 100% paid for by the regional center. You should never be paying anything out of pocket for either one of these. These are services part of self-determination program.
Thank you for saying that. I was gonna, I wanted to make sure that everyone knew that when you said that to us earlier. I thought, well, I want to make sure everybody knows that because I don't know specifically, but I think I've heard that some people feel like that, if they're paying or if they found their own independent facilitator or financial management service and they're paying, for it themselves, they feel like they're getting better, um, better service, but that's not necessarily the case, right?
Um, and it's not necessarily the case. And independent facilitators are paid through Medi-Cal dollars, And one of the things with whenever anybody who is paid through Medi-Cal dollars, that's their complete payment. They can't ask for additional payment. That's part of the laws around it. So, um, nobody should be asking you for additional money for it.
Right. Well, so and then of course, if it's covered through self-determination, why wouldn't you just do that, right? Like that just makes sense. Yeah. I
Well,
bet a lot of families don't know that, right?
right. And I'll tell you, we do not have enough trained independent facilitators right now. And so it is hard to find somebody. So that's part of why we're saying it does take a long time. But I do think finding the right person for you that you're comfortable with, that fits with your family, who gets like,
What
oh,
your
okay,
needs are.
what
Yeah.
your needs are. They shouldn't be trying to push you in any direction or fix anything. They should be there to support you, not the other way around. Right.
That's wonderful. Thank you. You have given us so much great information. I hope that everyone feels like that they've gotten a little bit of a better understanding. But as we get ready to go into Q&A, which we're going to do here any second, are there any last final comments that you would like to make about like the most important part of this conversation that you want people to walk away with and put into action today, if they're interested in self-determination?
Um, I can tell you part of why self-determination is so important to me personally is I do worry about what happens to my son when I am gone. And so for me, self-determination, not just the program, which is how you get services, but self-determination as a philosophy is very important as a civil rights movement. And it really is the next step in civil rights where my son should have the right to choose where he lives and how he spends his time, just like everybody else does. And so I think it's really important um, for me that he also learns to advocate for himself and he's learning to exercise his ability to say, I want to do this, I don't want to do that. As a mom, I'm a mom, I'm protective, and to be able to back off a bit and see him really blossom into he's more independent than I ever imagined he could be, and he will surprise me every single day all
Yeah.
through the future. And so um this is my goal, is that he is living the life that without the limitations that other people can put on him. And so I would not give up self-determination for anything, even though there are days it's difficult and it's hard. And I think that's true. We have not had a lot, very, very few people leave it once they're in it. Um, but I won't lie, it's work. It is work for the person who is managing the program. And again, you hire help. Get help to help you with it, with the intent that someday I can actually retire and I could take a vacation, and I know somebody else has him covered.
Yeah, that's a good goal. That's something to work towards, right? Yeah, and that's again a win-win. Thank you so much, Christiana. You gave us so much great information. So we're going to roll into Q&A in just 1 second. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about the Caring Futures program and what it has to offer. The Future is Now, Designing a Support Plan for You and Your Adult Family Member is a 6-week live online class series where caregivers develop a comprehensive future planning guide for the caregiver and their adult family member with a disability, all in a small and welcoming environment. Self-Care Matters, Well-Being for the Caregiver is a 2-week live online class series where caregivers learn about practices and tips, resources, strategies to improve and sustain their well-being. Future is Now and Self-Care Matters classes are also offered in Spanish. Visit the Caring Futures website at caringfutures.org and join our mailing list to keep up to date on these offerings and to register for classes and more. Also, if you want to keep this conversation going, I invite you to join the Caring Futures Facebook group. It's a private group only for family caregivers and is a safe space for us to share our triumphs and challenges. A link to the Facebook group will be posted in the chat right now. Thank you again, Christiana. So let's move into Q&A. We're going to begin our Q&A session. Type your questions in the Q&A feature and we will answer you directly or call your question to the attention of the group. Our guests will answer you directly, and you may raise your hand if you need to access the ASL interpreter to ask your question, and then we will give you video access for that. So let's get going. It looks like we have a lot of questions in here.
I see some great questions.
Yeah.
The first one that struck me was, what happens if the self-determination program isn't working for you or isn't completely right? You know, can you go back to traditional system? Do you have to kind of go through that uh, getting into the traditional system again? So no, once you are in the regional center system, you are in the regional system for life. And so this is just an alternative way to get services. So you can go back to traditional system at any time. And so don't worry about that. If you get into it and you say this isn't working for me, you can absolutely go back to traditional system. The only rule they have is that if you switch back, you have to wait 12 months before you go back into, if you decide, oh, now I do want to go back into self-determination, there is a little bit of a lag. You can't pop back and forth, which we all know because it took you 9 months to get in. You probably don't want to do that anyway. But you were absolutely, and you will never have a gap in service. So on that 9 months, while you're working on getting in, you are part of traditional system until the day you join self-determination. The day you leave self-determination, you are part of the tradition. So you always have services.
Oh, good to know. Thank you for that. All right, let's see what else we've got here. So Tracy asks, what advice would you give someone who is considering switching from traditional SLS program to SDP oriented one, especially since this involves hiring a team of staff to support a person 24/7 and involves more than just hourly pay, but insurance, retirement benefits, etc.
Tracy, that's a great question. So there's two pieces in here. One, you can still use traditional SLS programs in self-determination program if they're willing to work with self-determination funding. So it doesn't mean you can't use vendored services. As long as they're willing to work with self-determination, any of the traditional services you can continue to use. It also means you can use vendored services that are vendored with other regional centers. So you're no longer limited to just the ones for your regional center. So it kind of opens the door for a lot of different things. So if you like your current SLS agency, and you can ask them, will you take self-determination payment? And some of them will, and some of them won't. It's one of those things. So the other piece then is if you say, well, I want to be responsible, I'm going to hire all of these people, then I would say, get a good independent facilitator. This is what they are really good at. And we'll put in the chat a link. We have some links to how to, a couple lists for independent facilitators. I recommend going to your local volunteer advisory committee. Every regional center has a local volunteer advisory committee, and they have funds to spend to help implement self-determination. And some of them have coaching. Some of the regional centers have support groups. So go and find out what your regional center has, because they can also help you. And independent facilitators often go to these. So it's a good place to find an independent facilitator that works with your area. And ask other people who were in self-determination. Do you have somebody you like? And then interview them. Just because your friend liked them doesn't mean they're going to work for you. So yes, when you go into self-determination, you will be the one responsible for doing the staffing and all of the things that you talked about.
Thank you, Kristianna. That was great. And I see Tracy also asked, don't FMS services come out of the client's budget? And I think you answered that earlier. That was yes, right?
Actually, no. The financial management service is the only vendored service you're required to have in self-determination, and it is paid for by the regional center, is not included in your budget, isn't
Oh, okay.
deducted from your budget. The one that actually does come out, so the ongoing services for independent facilitators, they won't increase your budget to pay for that. But again, it's one of those things as I was explaining, of how you look at it as one big dollar amount and how you're going to spend your things. So it's not one for one. Oh, I got, $100 for, social skills. So I have to spend $100 for social skills spent in this self-determination program. There's no linkage at all. You can spend it kind of however you want, as long as it relates to a goal in your IPP. So.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying that. So let's see, Tolene asked, would you speak to the question on how clients can pay for an independent facilitator on the spending plan if the funds for the IF are not added to the budget? You sort of just did, right?
I just did. Hi, Talene.
Yeah.
So yes, it's when we look at it as an overall dollar amount, you'll be surprised how much things like respite, the respite provider themselves probably makes minimum wage, the person who's coming out to your house. But what the regional center is paying that agency is a lot more. So what happens then is I get those dollars, I put them in my spending plan. I can pay my person who is going out with my son more per hour and still have money left over to pay for other things. So that's kind of how it works. Um,
Okay. And then Carmen asked, how does this differ from coordinated support services?
um, so I think she might be talking about the new program, which is coordinated family supports.
Hmm.
And so the idea of coordinated family supports, supported living services are for people who live outside of the home when our loved one lives outside the home. Coordinated family supports kind of came about for the people who are living at home and need and maybe the parents getting older and they can't provide those same services, right? And so it's kind of like SLS in the home with a couple caveats. One, coordinated family supports are time limited. And they're also a vendored service, which means you don't get to pick who is doing that.
Okay.
And coordinated family supports are also held outside of the budget because they're saying it's a pilot program. So if you say, I want coordinated family supports, it's something that would be held outside of self-determination, and you would have to use the vendored service of the regional center. Now, you could do kind of the equivalent of coordinated family supports in self-determination by saying, I'm going to hire somebody like my independent facilitator to organize the supports, to help take them to the doctor, to take them to their meetings, to help organize their in-home support service, uh, all of those kind of things. So you can absolutely hire people to do those things.
Okay, great. So we have a question here from Cynthia. How early should a parent start this process? My son is 15 and we just moved to a new city and are trying to connect with the regional center in our new city. In our previous city, we didn't do the self-determination program, but now that he is older, this may be something to do as he moves closer to graduating and moving to adult services. So what are your thoughts on that, Christiana? Because I know some people do this even with children. You don't have to be an adult, right?
Yeah, it's really for any age. It kind of goes back to the individualized need. If the traditional system isn't meeting your needs, then you should look at self-determination. Um, what our what I found quite often is as they become teenagers and turn into adults is when those traditional vendored services kind of stop meeting people's needs.
Yeah.
And that's really so I think at 15 is a great age to start thinking about this. And again, remember, if it's going to take 9 months, plan ahead. So if you think you might want it, uh, when they graduate or when they're coming out of their schooling at 22, then kind of plan ahead of to do that.
That sounds good. So Robin asks, can you talk a little bit about personal assistance? Is this only for SDP or can we get this through the regional center now?
So I'm kind of a broken record because I always say 21 regional centers, 21 ways of doing things. Not all regional centers offer personal assistance. It depends on your regional center, what they call it. Some have personal assistance, some have behavioral personal assistance, some don't even use personal assistance. They want you to use respite. So it really depends on your regional center. But typically, and then some of them will say, yeah, you can have one, and you can even self-direct with participant-directed services. Say, I want to hire this person to be our personal assistant. The only difference between traditionally doing that and the self-determination program is their rates are set. So when you stay in the traditional system, if you get a personal assistant who you self-direct, they set this is the dollar amount per hour they can get. In self-determination, you can set the rate. And for my family, this has been really important because when you talk about it is hard to find people to hire right now. I mean, that this is across the whole state, no matter what you're in. And so the ability to pay people more per hour has really reduced our turnover for my son. My son doesn't like the new people. It's difficult for him that he likes
Right.
things kind of the same. And so turnover was always really hard on him. And so the ability to pay somebody more per hour has been able to, we've been able to keep them a lot longer. Uh, so
Yeah, no, that's such an important thing. I mean, we have the same issue with my daughter too. So is the budget updated annually? Did you mention that already?
it is. So the
It
budget
is.
is updated annually, but also remember, you're still part of the regional center system. So that means all of the protections of the regional center system apply to you. So if they want to remove a service and you disagree with it, you still have your fair hearing. You can, and so they can't just arbitrarily remove a service. They would have to give you a notice of action saying, we want to remove the service and this is why. And so um, so all of your protections are still there for you. So don't worry like, oh, I got this budget this year and then next year it's all going to go away. That you still have that. It's pretty similar. The only time I see budgets get reduced are for a couple reasons. And one is if you had a one-time purchase, like we're going to put handrails in the bathroom, in the
Right.
bathtub, you don't need to do that every year. So they might deduct something like that. But in general, they stay pretty steady.
Okay, that's good to know. Now, we've had a lot of questions in here about becoming an independent facilitator, and you mentioned that there are not enough of them. I don't know if we want to get into a lot of detail there, but what would you recommend for people like to access that information? Like, what does it require? How long does it take? What is that? If you could give us a brief explanation about that, that would be great.
I think this is good for both people who are hiring them and who want to become one.
Yes.
So how do you know you're hiring a good independent facilitator? How do you become one? Are almost the same question. So currently in the state, there is no certification required. And so anybody can call themselves an independent facilitator, which means when you are hiring one, you need to ask questions. Have you done this before? What is your experience? Do you know my local neighborhood? Those kind of things. To learn to become one, there are training programs out there. And so there are a few that are existing. And I will say currently, Department of Developmental Services is working on a certificate or certification program. We don't
Okay.
expect it to be done for at least until another year, if not farther out than that. So in the meantime, um, you can take one of the courses that are out there. Also ask your local volunteer advisory committees because a lot of them are aware we don't have enough independent facilitators. So some of them are paying for independent facilitator training. Some of them are paying you to attend one of the trainings that exists. They'll pay your tuition. So go and ask your local volunteer advisory committee if you're interested in training.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see. There are so many. I'm trying to get to all the ones that I think can answer generally for people. I'm not
I
sure.
see a great one from Rich.
Okay, good.
He said, "What's the first step?" What do we need to do to determine we want to go into the self-determination program? And it's so funny. We had this whole conversation and didn't say that. Sometimes, you forget what people don't know sometimes. And
Right.
so we start talking, like we go really deep and forget, oh, so the first thing you need to do is you need to attend an orientation. And so we can put the link in the chat for SCDD, this State Council of Developmental Disabilities has an orientation. It's online, it's through Zoom. Most of the regional centers also have their own orientation. So you can attend either one of those and you get a certificate in the end. You take that to your service coordinator and say, we're going to start the transition process into self-determination. Um, I want to give you a little heads up about the orientation. I actually co-train at the SCDD orientation. It's 2 hours. It is an enormous amount of information. You are going to walk away overwhelmed. don't panic. You don't need to remember everything in it at the time. It's so much information. I wish they gave out in smaller chunks because I'm one of those people. Give me the information when I need it. Like I don't want to talk about FMSs when I'm still thinking about how do I get a person-centered plan. Like give it
Right.
to me right at the time.
I'm the same way.
So, if you don't remember everything from the orientation, you can go back and take it as many times as you want. So if you're like, "Oh, I wish I'd heard this," there, you're welcome to go back. Um, and also know your independent facilitator knows all of that stuff. So it's really for your information, so you know about it, but your independent facilitator is going to be the expert. So they're going to hand hold all the way through. And when you get to the end, most of people will say, "Oh, okay, that wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be." It's just, you do something and then you wait, and you do something and then you wait. And so, well, it's a long process. It's doable. If you're patient, it's doable.
Well, that orientation, I took the one through our regional center here, Tri-Counties Regional Center, and that orientation actually got me very motivated to get
Good.
started on the, yeah. So, I mean, it is a lot of information, but it is actually very, encouraging. Like, you kind of want to at least delve in and learn more about it, right? And we went ahead and got the process started. We're kind of in a holding phase right now, but we haven't given up on it. We're just kind of waiting to get some more services moving, and then we're going to revisit the whole budget and all that kind of stuff. So that's great information. Thank you. So Talene mentions, where can people get good information and avoid the misinformation that is sometimes on the internet boards?
Oh, yes. The internet board is kind of the bane of my existence right now because there's a lot of misinformation on there. So one of the things I want to make sure people know about self-determination is to have realistic expectations. Um, this it, Everything is based on individual needs. So just because somebody else got it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to get the service because maybe their need was different than yours.
Right.
So I there's a lot of, well, I got this, so you should be able to get this. It's really not how it's designed or meant to work. And so we actually at Disability Voices United, we have two free Zoom meetings that you can come to. One is an intro, which is just people sharing their stories. So if you need ideas of, oh, what are things I could be doing? So we have people sharing what their self-determined lives look like, and that is on the first Friday of every month, and we can put the link in the chat. And then we have another meeting, which is called SDP Connect. We meet on the second and fourth Wednesdays, and it's kind of everything self-determination. And so you're welcome to come to those. Those are also free, and come and learn about self-determination. Another good place to meet independent facilitators. Both of those are, if you're looking for one, come put in the chat, I'm looking for an independent facilitator, and chances are they will pop up and say, oh, I provide services in your area. So
Thank you. That's great. This is probably a really common question, but I want to put it out there because I know that it is a challenge everywhere right now, no matter whether you're in self-determination or not. What if there are no vendors in your town or your area, and staffing is an issue no matter what avenue you look down?
um, it it is an issue. And I'll say the good news is that you're not required to use vendors. And so that opens it up to, you can hire anybody. And what we did with our family, because I hadn't hired people before I did this. It was one of the things I was most nervous about when we looked at self-determination. I'm like, I've got to hire somebody and figure all this stuff out. So we started by hiring family members. I hired his cousin who was home from college and would pick him up and drive him. He was his favorite person. He loved hanging out with him. And we started with that. And then we're like, oh, he's going back to college. We can hire, and so we learned along the way. It's much easier now. I'm very confident in hiring people. So you can be more creative. Um, Parents can be paid to care for their adult children in self-determination program. You can't provide a separate second service, but you can provide one. And so I am on my son's list. So when we have gaps, I cover. for them. So if somebody calls in sick, I'm like, oh, I can be there for you. I can drive you. I can get you where you need to go. And luckily, over time, as I've gotten better at scheduling people, it happens less often. But that's another thing you can do is have family members that can cover in a pinch. And you can also still use the like SLS agencies. So if you don't want to be the one scheduling, there's nothing that prevents you from using existing agencies if they're around. Some people
Thank,
use a combination.
yeah, I was gonna say that seems like that would work too. Thank you. That's good to know. Like I didn't realize that about the parents. Um, let's see.
And I'll say for the parent, because remember it's self-determination, it has to be. So there are
They
things
want.
exactly. There are things my son's like, yeah, of course, you can pay my bills. I don't want to do that. But you're not going to Disney with me.
Yeah.
Like, not cool. I'm not like showing
Well,
up.
and I think I saw in here in the question, someone asked that about if that's the kind of activity that can be paid for through self-determination, going to Disney and, going on trips and things like that. Can you speak to that a little bit?
It's such a great question. And it's one of those things that there's a lot of misconception around this. So I'll
Mhm.
tell you right off the bat, Disney, they will not pay for my son's ticket to Disney because it's purely recreational. It's something he would want to do for fun. However, they will pay for his staff time and the staff ticket to go. And so, and that's
Okay.
right. So he has access to Disney on his own, which he didn't before. And now that it's not cool to be with your mom and he wants to go with somebody who is his age or looks his age and they're going to go and have a great time, he now has access to it. And so there's kind of that little balance between, is this something that's related to their disability? You know, then it can be paid for. If it's not, if it's something you would pay for in everyday life anyway, then, you would pay for those pieces.
But the fact that he needs support, they'll pay for the support,
Pay for
right?
the
Yeah.
support,
So
and they'll
that's
pay for the support's entrance fees. And so, and his transportation, getting back and forth. My son doesn't drive, so he can take an Uber and that. So kind of when you think about the same thing of vacations, well, would you be paying for your own vacation? Yeah, but that support person, is you only have that support person because you have a disability, in which case that's when the
right.
center would be paying for it.
Okay, that makes so much sense. Let's see. What else do we have here? If in the future my daughter would need other services that are not offered to her now, would we be able to negotiate the budget for self-determination at that point?
Such a great question. Yes. So you are not stuck. So what budgets can be adjusted for two reasons, an unmet need or a change in circumstance. And so something changes, again, we see this really significantly when people leave school because you had this huge generic resource that was paying for the bulk of the services, right? And then it goes away. Regional center is going to be, this is a major change in circumstance. They're going to be picking up the tab for all those things that the the generic resource would have been covering is no longer covering. So you can always, and even your person-centered plan, this is meant to be a living document. Nobody says, oh, this is what I want to do. And forever, like everybody changes their mind. And when they're younger, they change their mind even more often, right? Like, oh, this week I want to do this. And so it's meant to be fluid and changing. And so, yes, you can absolutely ask for money. Now you can't ask for money in your budget because like, well, I just didn't manage my money well and we're running out. Like there's like kind of like, but you could say I have a new thing that I need to do that it wasn't, we hadn't met this need before. So,
Okay, let's see. What questions should we ask an FMS prior to hiring them?
oh, that's a great question. We actually have a list. I was actually updating this list. It's very funny because things change. Just so you know, it's a new program. We jokingly call it like we're building a plane in flight. So things change a lot in self-determination, which can be frustrating to people. But so when you said you're going to send out links, let me find the link for them. I'll give you for our newest list of questions for financial management services that you can send out to everybody. So I don't give you an old list of questions. But the main things you want to be looking for is um, how do you pay? So look at what is in your spending plan and the types of things you're going to be paying for. So if most of your spending plan is hiring staff, you want to find an FMS that works really well with payroll, right? That they do just that's their thing. And then there are other financial management services that are better for paying for things in the local community. If you want, like my son likes classes. And so I want to find somebody who's going to pay for the classes easily, that they don't have to sign up with them, that they'll just pay with a credit card, those kind of things. And each of the FMSs do things differently. So you want to find that one that's going to work for your needs. So you'll hear all the time, oh, this is a good one, this is a bad one. It's really based on your needs of what you need them to do.
Very individualized, it sounds like, in either role, right? The independent facilitator, the financial management service, and it's not a one size fits all, right? And like you were saying, like, oh, you need to get this, we got this, so you can get this. It doesn't, that's not necessarily beneficial for you, right? Like you want what you need, right? Those are the kinds of things. Great. Thank you for, and yeah, and so just to clarify, so after the webinar today, when we send out a thank you email for joining with the recording, Kristianna is going to also include some links that will be helpful. So be on the lookout for that in your email, probably later today or tomorrow. So let's see what other questions we have. Oh, we're just about at 11 o'clock. I think we can probably squeeze in one more question. So Richard asks, how do you find out the budget amount that we could use for the services?
Oh, another good question. So you're going to start with the last 12 months that you utilized. That's where your budget, and remember, this is a budget negotiation. Now, they don't like it when I call it that, but that's what it is. This is a negotiation. So you're going to start there. Well, for a lot of people, we had authorized, I had authorized X amount of hours for respite and we weren't able to use any of them. So you start with saying, okay, I couldn't use those because they didn't have anybody available. So then they'll put that money back in. And then you'll say, okay, based on my person-centered plan, here were the unmet needs. So for my son, it was, we knew he needed social skills. He tried all the vendored ones, didn't like any of them. So it was no longer in what we were spending. So we went in and asked, his unmet need is social skills. So then they were able to add that into the budget. So you will build your budget kind of as a back and forth. So they may give you, the regional center is going to give you a starting point, and don't panic. That is not necessarily where you're going to end up. And again, this is where a good independent facilitator is going to be able to help navigate that system. And remember, the goal is not to get the most money or the highest budget. And people will brag about, oh, I got this huge budget. The goal is to meet the needs of your loved one. And so from your person-centered plan, you have an idea of these are the things they want to do in their life. And yes, this is enough money to do that. That's your goal. Don't compare yourself to other people.
No, that's that's wise advice just overall, right? Thank you so much, Kristianna, for joining us today. Thank all of you for joining us today. That's our webinar for today, and we will see you next time. Have a great day, everyone.